Well, welcome everybody to our next session. I want to take a few minutes to thank our sponsors for doing this festival for us. First Horizon Bank has always been a great partner for us and supporter. And also Mr. and Mrs. Olin Mills were sponsors of the event. And we have had great support and want to thank University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, several professors helping us out on doing moderating and speaking today. So we thank them as well. And I hope if you don't know much about Southern Lit Alliance, I hope you'll take a minute to check out our website at southernlitalliance.org and check out all of our programs. We do SouthWord Literature Festivals, but a whole lot more in our community to really encourage people to read and write, writing contests, writing workshops, working in area jails, doing literary groups. So check all that out. So without further ado, I welcome our great friend, George Singleton, who's also been a great supporter of Southern Lit. I greatly appreciate it. And we are delighted to have him come on and talk about his new book. I call it the Best Of album that he has out. But George is, of course, a Southern author. He was born in California, bless his heart, but was raised in Greenwood, South Carolina, so did well. He graduated from Furman and had a degree in philosophy, but he holds an MF degree from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. He's been a longstanding teacher and writer, was at the South Carolina's Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities in Greenville for a while. He is now at Woodford College where he teaches, but he's had great honors. He was a Guggenheim Fellow, was awarded the Hillsdale Award for Fiction, and was joined the Fellowship of Southern Writers in 2015. He was also awarded the John William Corrington Award for Literary Excellence in 2016. And we just know him for his great Southern humorous tales and short stories that hopefully he'll share with us today. So I'll let people know too, we love some questions for George. So if you think of some, put them in the Q&A, and when we get done, have some time, we will let him answer them. George.
All right, thank you, Linda. Let me see. I wish I were in Chattanooga, and I wish we were all sitting upstairs on the rooftop of the Pickle Barrel, because this is one of my favorite restaurants in the United States of America. What I'm going to talk about today is how it came to being that this book called You Want More, Selected Stories came about. How this story came about, how this book came about, was one day I walked into the Hub City bookshop in Spartanburg, South Carolina, just minding my own business, as is my wont. And Meg Reed, the editor for Hub City Press, said, I want to have a meeting with you. I have to go out of town, but set up a meeting. And I went, no, because I'm real paranoid. So why the hell do I have to do a meeting? Tell me now. And she said, we think it's time for you to have a selected collection of your stories. Now, a couple other publishers had approached me in the past. And I thought, I just don't want some book to die on the vine. So I said, give me 24 hours to think about it. So I went home, and I knew Hub City was doing some great work. They had just published work by Michelle Stone, who was on, last hour. Here's her book, The Iguana Tree. And they'd done a book of poetry by Ron Rash, and they'd done a book by Carter Sickles. They were getting a lot of attention. So I knew things were, one of my old publishers was Algonquin Books in Chapel Hill. And I knew that Hub City was kind of doing what Algonquin was doing back in the old days, which is featuring Southern writers. So I said, give me 24 hours to think about it. I called up my buddy Ron, whom I've known since I was 15 years old. He and I met in 1912. And I said, what would you do? And he said, I'd do it in a second. You need to do it. He said, if I had a book of short stories right now, I would do it with Hub City. And I said, okay. So I thought, well, I'll call them up tomorrow and or go over there. This is back when Hub City Press was kind of in the back of the bookstore. Now they're in an old building in and of itself. And I'll do that. So that's kind of how that happened. Well, no, wait a minute. We got to go back to 1969, and this is how this book happened. Back in 1969, there was a TV show called Laugh-In, and on Laugh-In, there was this guy, Henry Gibson. Do y'all remember Henry Gibson? He used to do these poems, and he'd hold a big old flower in his hand, right? So I started watching Henry Gibson back when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a writer like Henry Gibson. But of course, back then, I didn't read and I didn't write at all. Instead, what I did was I became a distance runner. When I was running, though, from the ages of about 13 to 18, I thought up stories a lot, and I thought and thought and thought. And then, I took high school classes, and, we read things like Wuthering Heights and all those Charles Dickens books and Ethan Frome. They're really kind of depressing. So I thought, wow, this is kind of bad, but I still thought of myself as a writer, even when I was like a teenager. Then I went off to college, and I went to this college. It was Baptist. So it was kind of scary at the time, called Furman, and in Greenville, South Carolina. And I started reading things that weren't just depressing, so depressing that you want to commit suicide. I started reading Eugene Ionesco, this playwright, and Samuel Beckett, this playwright. And somehow along the line, I read the stories of Donald Barthelme and John Irving's World According to Garp and Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. And I thought, these books are funny. I didn't know that books could be funny. I thought things had to be really depressing. I think I can do this, because I was an idiot. And I was 20, 21 years old. Then I started writing. Boy, did I write like crazy. A couple thousand words a day, I bet, just typing like nuts. And I wrote and wrote and wrote. And I wrote in third person because I didn't want to write in first person, because people might think that that was actually me. That has never happened in my life, except one time my mother read a story of mine. Bless her heart. She's over there on the shelf in ashes. She said, I didn't know you lost your job and you had sex with a goat. And I said, no, Mom, that was a character in a story. I've never lost my job. So anyway, I wrote in third person. I wrote 450-page novel in my early 20s, and I wrote one that was 250 pages and one that was 300 pages. Somewhere along the line, I had Professor Richard Bausch, who was here earlier this morning, say to me, after you've written 1,000 pages, you'll be ready. It's kind of like a 10-year bet with yourself. I thought to myself, well, it ain't going to take me that long, because I'm a genius, Somewhere along this line, too, and backtrack a little bit, my father, here's a picture of him. That's his Z card from when he's in the Coast Guard. He only went to the 10th grade, and he ran away from home, and he joined the Merchant Marines. My father, when I was in college, called me up one day and said, what do you want to do? And I said, I guess I'm going to go to law school. And he said, you want to be a lawyer? And I said, not really, because everybody I know in my classes who are going to law school, I kind of hate these people. And he said, why would you go work a job for 45 years out of your life that you hate? Don't do that. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a philosophy major and I want to write. And he said, well, then do it. So, my dad with his 10th grade education, merchant marine, blue collar worker, best advice ever. Though later on, he would call me up a lot when I was working as a house painter or working construction. I drove a garbage truck for a little while. I drove a water truck. Long story. He used to call me up at like 5 a.m. and say, hey, I'm looking at the want ads and I don't see philosopher for hire, and I go, okay, Dad, thank you a lot. Anyway, so I wrote and wrote and wrote. Richard Bausch told me that story about 1,000 pages and then you're ready. I thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about. All these bad third person novels I'd written. Also, they took place in Nice, France, which I've been to for 10 days in my life, and Washington, D.C., which I've been to for 7 or 8 months in my life, and Memphis, Tennessee, where I'd never even been in my life, because I thought, oh, who's going to want to read a story that takes place, or a novel, in a very small Southern community? So I got to get a big town in here, you know? So I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. I didn't even know how to send things off, and I knew they were terrible. So I would just finish one and start another, finish the second one, start another. I finally started writing short stories in about 1987 or 88, after I graduated from grad school. At the same time, I started reading Flannery O'Connor. And then I went, oh man, well, first of all, I thought Flannery O'Connor was a man for a little bit, but then, because I didn't know that name Flannery. But then I went, oh, stories set in small Southern towns can be interesting. And I got it, right? So I started writing short stories like crazy. And I started teaching like English 101 classes with way too many students, too many classes, all that. So I started writing these stories, and I wrote, a bunch, and they started getting published. And the reason why they got published is because Dick Bausch was right. I'd written my 1,000 pages, and now I was kind of getting ready. So I started sending them off to magazines, and some agent named Nat Sobel read a couple of them and said, hey, I've been reading these stories. Have you ever thought about writing a novel? And I said, yeah, I've written a few novels. They suck real bad, but what the heck? He said, write another one. So I did. And this is before email. And I went and I put it out in the mailbox. I went down to this in Florence, South Carolina. I went and put it in the mailbox. And while my arm was still out, I got that rejection from Nat Sobel. And he wrote, I don't like this novel. Write another one. I don't really like people telling me what to do. If I want to be a plumber, and I am a plumber, and someone says you ought to be an electrician, go to heck, buddy. I want to be the plumber, right? So at that point in 1987, I said, I'm never going to write another novel again. I'm just going to focus on short stories. So I wrote and wrote and wrote short stories. And I got rejection after rejection on books. This went on until about 1999, when a very small press called River City Publishing in Montgomery, Alabama, which is no longer in business, said, hey, we like your stories. I'd publish stuff in Georgia Review and Southern Review and Playboy and all these places. Get together a dozen of your stories. So they published it. And then right after that, I started reading a bunch of stories by people who wrote great first-person retrospective stories. So it'd be an adult looking back at when that adult was a child. Like, when I was 12 years old, my father was nuts. And I thought, God, these are great stories by my buddy Delray Phillips and by this guy, Lewis Norden. So I started writing those. And then I really had some luck. Boy, those stories placed in Atlantic Monthly and Harper's and Zoetrope and all these great magazines. And I wrote and wrote and wrote. Then Algonquin, Shannon Ravenel, who's in the Fellowship of Southern Writers, got in contact with me and said, you got another story ready? And I said, another book ready? And I said, yes, I do. And it was called The Half Mammals of Dixie. And she published that, Algonquin published it. And then things really went flying. Meanwhile, I kept getting a lot of crap from agents and editors saying, you need to write a novel. So I was writing a short story called Novel that got a little bit long. It was about 40 pages. And then the guy named Andre Bernard, who was reprinting these hardbacks of mine from Algonquin, he said, what are you working on? And I lied. I said, I'm writing a novel. It's called Novel. It's about a guy writing a long poem. And he said, I want that. And he took it. And that was really a disaster, that novel. And then I wrote another book of stories and I wrote another novel. But then I said, that's it for me. I'm writing short stories. So I started writing these kind of linked stories that went on and on and on. And that's kind of how that went. So I wrote, I think the second novel came out in 2006. So now we're up to about 2019 when I walked into that bookstore and Meg Reed said, hey, it's time for you to have a selected. Okay, so I did that. She said, pick 25 or 30 stories and let's see how it looks. So I did, and I will look through all my books. At this point, I think there were eight or nine, maybe eight or nine collections of short stories. And I thought, God, a lot of these are in first person, because meanwhile, back in there, another professor, Fred Chappell, said, you're kind of funny. Why don't you write some things in first person instead of third? So I tried that, and then they started getting taken and all. And I started writing more about small southern towns, because that's where I grew up, in a small southern ex-cotton mill town. So Meg says pick 25 or 30. I did. And then she said, just send me an attachment with these stories. And I said, well, Meg, I don't have attachments for a lot of these stories, because some of them were written in the 1980s and some of the 1990s. It was before computers, and I don't even have copies of them at all, because and I don't save everything. And she said, you're an idiot. And I went, I am. So then I said, I'll just type up these stories, because I can type pretty fast, it won't take that long. She said, don't worry about that. There's this thing where we can, I forget what it's called. Linda, maybe you'll know this word, where you, just kind of photocopy the story, and it comes up on your computer, whatever that's.
Scan it into a PDF. We do that all the time.
So I went and I ripped out these 30 stories from different books, right? Delivered them. We're going to scan it. They scanned it and they sent it to me to look over. Well, you would think that in the 21st century, where we have all kinds of technological advances, that the scanning process would work a little bit better than it did. It did not. So there were like lowercase i's that became L's or ones, the numeral 1, and there were R's that became N, letter N, as in Nancy. At some point, I had somebody showing pom-poms, and it came out porns. At some place, I had a dog that was a Pomeranian that became a Porneranian, which I thought was kind of funny and wanted to keep, but then that didn't go over. So after all of that, we finally got it going out, and I was so worried that this is just going to be another book that died on the vine, because my previous book, boy, oh boy, just nothing ever happened. But out of nowhere, it got really good starred reviews in Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and Booklist or whatever. It did okay. But they're short stories, so a lot of people don't really like short stories. I'm not sure why they don't. Not everybody listens to entire operas on albums. They listen to little songs. Why don't they just read little short stories? That's just my little bias there. So anyway, that's how this stupid book finally made it to press. Now, I'm going to read some from it, if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
I need to tell you, too, that most of my stories are about, they all take place in the South. Most of them are about people either wanting to get out of their pathetic little small towns or wanting to get back to their pathetic small towns. It's kind of like country songs, right? It's like country songs, I'm in love. I'm in a marriage and I want to get out, or I'm alone and I want to have someone to love me. I got a job that I hate and I want to get out of it. I ain't got no job. I want a job. They're all about that. And these stories are kind of, for the most part, in that realm. But I wrote this one story, and when Meg said get the stories together and see, we had to go through, what kind of order we want them. Since I'm better at writing first person I stories, but 20 of those in a row are kind of obnoxious. So I'd get a first, third person, first, third person. I think there were 21 first person and maybe 20 first person, and then 9 third person stories. So I got them kind of in a row. But then the last story is a short that's in second person. And it's kind of what I'm trying to get at, and it's the last story of the book, is watch out what you wish for. You know, you want your town to change, and maybe change isn't all that great. So that's what I'm going to read. And this is a little story called What Could Have Been. Take a left out of the driveway. Take a left at the stop sign. Drive to the first convenience store, which used to be a 7-Eleven or pantry or Quickway, but now offers scratch cards and fuel perks. Take another left-hand turn. Get in the slow lane. Drive past the elementary school that looks nothing like the one you attended. A row of brick ranch-style houses, maybe a set of clapboard mill village houses. At the light, there will be a McDonald's here. Take a right. Past the Dollar General or the Dollar Tree or the Dollar Store. Look to the left and see how the pawn shop sells guns and buys gold, as always. Past the grocery store that used to house a different chain, that used to house a different chain, that used to house a different chain. Publix, Bilo, Food Line, Ingles, Winn-Dixie, Community Cash, IGA, Piggly Wiggly. You'll try to remember the succession. The same will occur at the Bank of America, Nations Bank, First Union, CNS, that other longtime local savings and loan where you started a checking account in high school. Drive past a barrage of fast food restaurants that includes a Burger King, Hardee's, Dairy Queen, Sonic, Chick-fil-A, Zaxby's, Pizza Inn, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, Little Caesars, KFC, Bojangles, Captain D's, etc. Outback, Chili's, Ruby Tuesday, Applebee's, Moe's Southwestern, TGIF, Subway, another McDonald's, Firehouse Subs, Taco Bell, another Bojangles, Ryan's, Red Lobster, IHOP, and so on. Huddle House, Waffle House, Cracker Barrel, Shoney's. This will take about 2 miles. In between, there will be a Walmart, a vacant Kmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, and Big Lots. Exxon, Texaco, BP, Citgo, Shell, Kangaroo, Sunoco, none of which have full service or mechanics available who can fix a flat or check transmission fluid. Take another right onto the 4-lane road. There used to be a 2-lane country road 40 years earlier where you and your friends drove around smoking cigarettes, drank Miller ponies, pulled over with the overhead light on into rusty gated pasture entrances so someone could fumble with zigzag rolling papers. Drive past the dilapidated wooden building that housed the little store where your father bought knee-high grape sodas or New Grape. It's a place where the owner got murdered and the police never caught a killer. Or it's the place that the owner's children didn't want to operate, seeing as their father sent them off to college. Or it's the place where the owner had diabetes so advanced that the doctor said a leg needed amputation and the owner felt as if he had no better choice, what with all the grocery stores nearby, than to put a shotgun in his mouth behind the ancient tree behind the property. One of your friends used to claim that a man got hanged from the lowest branch of that tree. One of your friends carved his initials, plus the initials of, say, Ann Guy in that tree. Years later, 20 years later, you figured out that the AG really stood for a boy who didn't smoke cigarettes, roll joints, or drink from tiny beer bottles. Alan Gray or Alvin Gillespie or Aaron Giles. He was the boy who got accepted to a college where no one from your hometown went, and he made a mark on the world before dying in a tragic manner, not much different from the owner of the store where your father bought bygone classic sodas, which made him smile. Pass a junk shop that holds as much merchandise outside as inside the cement block building. There's a sale on drive-in speakers. You're not that far away. Pass a subdivision of look-alike houses wherein all the roads are named for British monarchy. Pass a subdivision of look-alike houses wherein all the roads are named for famous golf courses of the world. Pass a subdivision of look-alike houses wherein all the roads are named for Ivy League colleges. Pass a subdivision of look-alike houses wherein all the roads are named for Native American accoutrements. You will reach the land where the drive-in movie theater once stood. The screen structure remains, though the front of it peels away. Metal posts stand without their speakers, like the headless parking meters at the beginning of Cool Hand Luke, which you probably saw here. You should park your vehicle and walk these grounds, already scoured by men and women with metal detectors, already used for a makeshift flea market that somehow failed, already surveyed for a 3 cul-de-sac subdivision called Hollywood Hills that will offer nothing but drainage problems for the houses built closest to the screen. Go to the back row, or at least where you think the back row might have been. Forget about the snack bar slash projection booth. Weave through high weeds to the back row and think about how the windows fogged up. Think about how you never, through all of the pre-planning, imagine what difficulties a steering wheel might offer, or how the seats might nearly concuss both of you after pulling the levers, or how you tried to maneuver into the back seat as if you'd had experience as a rock climber and high hurdler. Think about the difficulties both of you encountered, brought about by a triple row of brassiere metal eye hooks there on your first real date, or at least the first date remembered. Think about the bad acting, the car chase, the unreal setting, the chainsaw, the shark, the blob, the giant insect, the monster, the seemingly normal neighbor with the unruly, untoward, and despicable urges. Think about tires on gravel and how you hoped the driver continued on, that it wasn't anybody you knew, that it wasn't your parents. Were there swing sets down by the screen where children played before the movie? Did you think to yourself, those poor idiot parents bringing their children to a place like this on a Saturday night? Was there some kind of coming attractions? Did you say to the person next to you, I got your coming attractions, and think it was the wittiest thing ever said? Stand on that spot. Stand where you think your Opel, Datsun, Ford, Chevy, Buick, Toyota, MG Midget, or parents' Lincoln or Cadillac might have stood. Look at the compromised screen. Go ahead and say, fucking A, how did I make it this far? Say, Jesus Christ, all that bad living, all those close calls, what could have been? What could have been? What could have been? Then there's the mother or father standing there 30 minutes after curfew in the story you've memorized. You have 20 lies, all of which you'll recycle for the rest of your life, though you didn't know it then, in the driveway, looking at your hand on the gear shift, thinking about putting it in reverse. All right, so there's that story. Oh man, we're only like 30 minutes into this. That's it. Anybody got questions? Come on.
We can talk about lots of things. I do have a question. This is a Deck Cheatham. He says, hey, George, we were classmates at Furman, and he has been writing about the last 6 years. He's really interested in your process, when you write, how many words each day, etc.
Boy, it's really changed. You know, when Mr. Bausch was talking earlier, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was flying. And then things just kind of petered out. I don't know. A lot of it had to do with, you know, sending out stories and just never heard from anybody. I didn't hear good or bad. In my best habit is I get up really, really early, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I write until dawn or something like that. And then I'm kind of just done. And then I reread the next morning. I reread what I wrote the previous day, and I kind of change that because I have this terrible propensity to have the main character change names halfway through a story. And then I kind of rewrite. So every story is rewritten a bazillion times before I say it's okay to send this out. And you know, some people say put the story in a desk drawer for 6 months and I don't have that kind of patience. I send it out. There, it's kind of like, not that I own a gun, but it's kind of like shooting a gun. You can either get a rifle with a scope and really concentrate and shoot toward the target, or you can just go get a shotgun and just shoot up in the air like crazy, hoping you hit something. I'm from that kind of, what was that noise? You hear that noise?
Yes, that would be someone texting me a question. So, because I couldn't put it up. So go ahead. Sorry.
I thought you were hungry and your stomach growled.
Yeah, that's next.
Anyway, that's kind of how I go about it, for better or worse. I'm also real superstitious. So normally I sit over there at the desk. The reason why I'm kind of sitting here is my internet. If I move over there, it's not going to work. And if I move 3 feet over there, it's not going to work. So I normally sit there and write. And if I write something and it ends up getting accepted and I wrote it on the computer, that's how I'm going to write the next one. If I sit over there and I hand wrote it first and it gets accepted, I'm going to handwrite the next story. I also have this shed that's turned out to be more of a holding spot for deer corn, because we have 5 humongous subdivisions being built around us, and the deer have lost their habitat and are all hanging out in my backyard going, hit me, give me some corn. So that's what my writing shed has turned into a silent.
Awesome. So really where you sit in that room feels like what is it? Good mojo or?
It usually works, and I'm not around a window because I'll stare out a window for hours at a time like an idiot. Yeah, just kind of in that one spot.
I hear from a lot of authors that they get up super early in the morning and write. Is that because it's so quiet? What's so special about before dawn?
In fact, I'm down to 1 dog. At one point, we had 11. They're all rescue dogs. And when we moved to Spartanburg about 7 or 8 years ago, I had 7 dogs, and 6 of them committed suicide. I'm kidding. So in the old days, I kind of get up because I know those dogs are going to start raising hell around 6 or 7 a.m. and let them out, feed them and all that. So I can at least get a couple hours,
Yeah. Well, it seems to be a common practice. So the other question we have is, as someone who writes novels and short stories, what would you say are the fundamental differences in how you approach them?
I'm not the best person to ask that question. I don't know. The only time I've written novels is when except those 3 early ones that were so god awful, is when a short story just kind of got out of control. Even that I wrote a novel called Work Shirts for Madmen, and a big chunk of that novel was a short story in the Atlantic Monthly that I kind of fleshed out on both sides of it. I don't have golly, for writing a novel, it's just so difficult to just concentrate that much. With a short story, I can just go, okay, for short story, I go, here's the conflict, here's the action, here it ends, kind of like it began, With a novel, I don't know how to do it, nor do I wish to do another one in my life. I think it takes just a lot more patience and concentration. Boy, I think it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't like digging a ditch tough. Digging a ditch or roofing in the summer, that's tough. But writing novels, pretty rough.
Yeah. So, I mean, where do most of your ideas come from? Is it from your past or things in childhood, or just comes to you?
Usually it's just a little bitty, usually I kind of hear a voice in my head, just say one line, and then like the story I'm working on today is I forget the guy's name. I didn't mean to have Bert attacked by children carrying litter pickers that I made. Now, in the old days, some job I had for the beautification committee of Greenwood, South Carolina, you had like a shovel handle with a nail in the end of it. And you nail it in, and you cut it off, and you put it up against the grinding wheel. Then you go pick up, litter. So I had this idea about a guy who's somehow asked to volunteer to make those things because he's got a grinding wheel. And then these kids who go ballistic and attack their teacher with these sticks. So it looks like Pamplona, where they're killing a bull or something like that. So a lot, especially in the last 20 years, a lot of it's just one little line that happened to me. But things that happen in my real life are not all that exciting, but you can make it kind of exciting. You have to add crap on.
Yeah, my grandfather had one of those, and I broke it digging in the ground with it, and he was so mad at me.
This is so bad. The other day I was raking with a rake because I hate leaf blower. So I was raking, and the leaves were 2 feet, and I was raking this old rake, and then suddenly somebody hit me in the side of the head so bad that my ear started bleeding, because when I was raking, the handle broke and went bam right into my ear, and I went, well, that's the reason why I should not be doing yard work.
Yeah, that's what blowers are for. Okay, I had a question. You wrote a book, Pep Talks, Warnings, and Screeds, which is a great book about writing. So talk a little bit about that. I know it was illustrated with Daniel Wallace, who's going to be on with us later today, talking about getting published. You might talk about more about that then as well, but share a little bit about that book.
One day, sometimes I have these little aphorisms if I'm lucky. I was teaching a class, and this very Southern country young woman said, "You need to write those things down that you're always telling us." One of them would have been like the shotgun and the rifle thing, right? And I thought, you know what? I should be writing these things down. I'm going to sit down and write everything I know about writing that's some kind of aphorism or metaphor or analogy. And I sat down to do that, and I came out with about 2 pages. It was like not very long at all. But then I got angry about it and said, come on, you can do better than this. And I mentioned it to someone who had a friend who was like an editor at like Writer's Digest books. And she said, do it. Write that book. I want that book. And I said, okay, so I'll do it. Then over the years, a lot of people have said to me, Daniel Wallace wrote Big Fish. So over the years, all these people at bookstores have said, hey, are you buddies with Danny Wallace? And I went, I never met him. And they went, we cannot believe y'all have never met up. Y'all get along great. So we finally met in Nashville one evening at the Southern Festival of Books. And I mentioned to him this stupid book that I was writing, and he said, I want to illustrate it. I want to illustrate it. So, and then he was kind of adamant about it. And so then we did it, and I would write stuff and send it to him, and he'd draw a little picture. They're funny little pictures. I don't have that book around me anywhere, but it's called Pep Talks, Warnings, and Screeds. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm sure lots of great nuggets in that as well. So you talked a little bit about Flannery O'Connor and her writing from small towns.
Man.
Who else really influenced your version of the South?
Well, later on, but it took a little while. I don't know if I have his book around here. I thought I did. It's Lewis Norden. He wrote Music of the Swamp, and he wrote Wolf Whistle and All Girl Football Team. He wrote a funny memoir called Boy with Loaded Gun. He also, he wrote about small town Mississippi. He was brought up around near Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was lynched. Steve Yarborough, Steve probably knew him. I never met him. But Lewis Norden later on, boy, I just couldn't get enough of him. And Miss O'Connor, I mean, God almighty. Imagine how long she lived, only 39 years old or something like that. I can't imagine what she would have
come up with if she'd lived another, double her life. That's what really changed me, though. And then there are those kind of absurd stories, like I mentioned, Donald Barthelme was just writing kind of goofball stuff. I shouldn't say it that way, but absurd fiction that I was really drawn to. Barry Hannah's a guy that, sometimes I just open up a book, just read a couple pages just to hear his language. I don't think he knew much about plot, but man, the sentences one after another are just amazing,
Mm-hmm. Well, I have another question for you real quick. When somebody wants to know if you are a pantster or an outliner.
What was that first word?
Pantster, seat of your pants is what I'm assuming. Do you write about seat of your pants or you outline?
Seat of the pants. I'll tell this, I think this is great advice that Shannon Ravenel gave me one time. She said, in this kind of a voice, she said, George, a great short story's ending kisses the beginning. And too many of your stories are groping the beginning, which, boy, thanks for that. And she was right. So now if I start a story off with, it's in a used car lot, and I start writing, and there forever and ever and ever, I go, golly, you get to about word 3,000, story's gonna be about 5,000 words. Where's this gonna end up? I have no clue. But now I know, oh yeah, I'm gonna mention a used car lot at the very end, or it's gonna be set in a used car lot. It's gonna have something to do. So I kind of feel a little bit, I'm not so as anxious about the ending as I was, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. When we look at like a story like Rock Springs by Richard Ford, it starts with him kind of stealing a Mercedes Benz, and it ends with him looking in a car, getting ready to steal it, at a Ramada Inn, 6,000 words later. So many stories kind of, you'll notice that circular thing. So that's that. So I don't outline, but I kind of know where I'm going, usually.
Awesome. Well, thank you, George. That was great. Thanks for sharing about your book. And we really look forward to digging into those great stories over the years and seeing what you picked, which I'm sure was hard too. So thanks for sharing your time today.